Hello again, slot car fans. Today I'm going to be doing another product review, and the product that I'm going to be reviewing is a new car that's come out into the Australian market space. I'm not sure about its availability in other geographies, but here in Australia this car has only been out a day or two. It's a very exciting product. It almost occupies a space of its own, and so yeah, I'm quite happy to be taking a look at this one today. So the car I'm talking about is the new BRM 1/24 scale muscle cars, of which there are two. There's the Chevy Camaro Z28 Trans Am, and then there is the Boss Mustang Trans Am, and a fine pair of cars they are too. There's 5 variants in total being released at the moment, 3 Camaros and 2 Mustangs. They're all well worth a look, and I've got one here. We're going to have a look at that one in a moment. But before I do, let's look at a BRM predecessor model. Let's look at one of the most popular, I think, BRM Group 2 saloons, if you can call it that, the Alfa Romeo 1300 GT, the Alfa Giulia or Giulietta. Yeah, very good looking car, very popular race car if you race BRMs in 1/24 scale. So I just want to show this as for size comparison purposes, because now I'm going to hold up the Camaro. And I'm going to hold them nose to nose, and I'm going to have to come back a little bit because they don't fit in the picture otherwise. These are nose to nose. I'm not distorting this with perspective or anything. These cars are nose to nose. Okay? So just look how much bigger that Camaro is than that Alfa. And if you've raced the Alfa, you know, on a club track or something like that, you probably think, oh yeah, this is quite a big car. This is quite a big car. And now look at this Camaro. Look at the size of this thing. Yeah, and if I hold them up with their boot lids level, yeah, you can see how much further the bonnet protrudes than that of the Alfa. Yeah, that's how much bigger we're talking. Okay, and you can also feel it in the weight of the car as well. So I'm going to put the Alfa down for a second. Let's just spend a bit of time appreciating this, because I think they've done a great job to capture the character of this car. The body shape is accurate. You know, there's one in the background there. You can see, you know, there's the equivalent car in BRM slot car form. I think they've done a pretty good job capturing that. It looks nice. Okay, now this is a simple paint job. You know, it's white with black bonnet and boot lid, but they've done a great job in terms of making it look like a race car. Okay, the race number's good. You know, the sponsorship and ownership liveries are great. Yeah, all the different sponsor logos, etc. Yeah, you got to remember, back when this car was racing, we weren't talking about, you know, the massive sponsorship deals that are, you know, present nowadays. It was a case of mainly suppliers, really. That's who the sponsors were, and maybe one primary sponsor, like a car dealership or something like that. Yeah, so this is how the cars actually looked, and I think they've done a really good job to capture that. You know, they still kept the chrome bumper when they were racing, yeah. And it wasn't a very sophisticated form of racing. It was all about engine and chassis, yeah, and suspension. A little nod to aero, you know, bootlid spoiler, chin spoiler, yeah, but not a lot other than that, really. And that's how they went racing. And in this case, you know, against the Mustangs. What a sight this would be, running around Riverside or Watkins Glen or Laguna Seca, or, you know, any of those other tracks, Road America, Road Atlanta. You know, what a fantastic sight they would have been, and what a sound. Must have been one hell of a sound. I do remember seeing Camaros and Mustangs racing at Thruxton in the UK. When I was a kid, Thruxton was my local circuit, and I used to go out there at weekends. And sometimes you'd have a few muscle cars racing, and the thing that was always noticeable about them was that they just took off down the straights because they had their big, you know, 5-litre V8s, 6-litre V8s, whatever. The other thing you noticed was the sound. The sound was just absolutely off the scale. You know, for Europeans, you know, who used to like 4-cylinder 1.8s or 2-litre cars, these things would come along and the ground would shake, and it was awesome. It really was. So there we go. Yeah, nice paint job. The quality of paint on this is very good, very good. This is obviously just a pure white, but you can tell it's a really nice finish. It really is. These will, I'm assuming these are decals. I don't think these are tampo printed. I think these are decals because they're just really simple to apply in this context. I could be wrong on that, but the fact that the sponsor insignia down here or logos down here is very multicolour, you'd probably be better off doing that with a decal, and you've got them all in one place, so just do one decal, done. Same with the race number, and same with this over the back here. I'm going to assume maybe they're decals, although I'm running my finger over it now and it doesn't feel like decal at all. It feels like it's possibly a tampo print. So if it is, it's good quality, very good quality. Yeah, but what a lovely body shell, and a bit of interior detail as well. You know, you've got the driver with the open face helmet there. You know, he's got a dashboard, he's got a steering wheel, he's got a stick shift. Yeah, he's even got a fire extinguisher. Yeah, so a nice bit of detail there. As you'd expect in a 1/24 scale car, you expect a little bit more detail. You know, the quality of that windscreen, you know, I can't understate that. That's acrylic, and that's flawless, absolutely flawless. There's no scratches, no marks, and obviously the same goes for the rear as well. But it's ultra clear. It's ultra clear. You know, it's very good quality acrylic, clearly, if you'll pardon the pun. Okay, wheel trims. Yeah, wheel trims, very authentic. You know, BRM's run aluminium rims and they put plastic inserts to make what looks like an authentic wheel rim, and they've done a great job. I mean, compare that with the you know, the photo behind. You know, what a great job they've done. Yeah, just adds to the character of the car, doesn't it? It really does. It's lovely. Now, one of the differences here we're talking about, this is a completely new chassis design when compared to the saloon cars that BRM have previously done. So I'm just going to pop the lid on the Alpha just to show the layout on the Alpha, and it's very, you know, familiar to those of you who've run it before. You know, you've got these 4 float control nuts and bolts. Yeah, you've got the motor with the anodized aluminium motor mount. You've got the bearing holders to hold the axles in place with the brass spacers on the 3mm axles. You've got the standard angle winder gear setup. And in the case of a lot of these saloon cars from BRM up to this point, the front axle is a split rear axle, so they're independent of each other. And that's mandated because this slot guide holder is actually in the way. You couldn't run an axle all the way through there like that. You just can't. Which means that setting these stub axles up is actually not easy. To get them to rotate freely, but maintain directional integrity, you know, so they don't flap around all over the place, could actually be quite difficult. This one I'm pretty happy with. The fact that it's cambered as well adds to the character of the Alpha, but just, you know, it makes the setup even more difficult. Yeah, and obviously you've got that same spring-loaded guide that you're familiar with BRM's, but it's a fairly simple design in terms of the mechanics of the chassis. Very similar to a Revo. It's just like a scaled-up Revo up to 1/24 scale. Yeah. Now, if I do the same with the new Camaro, and as one thing that hasn't changed is the body mounting technique. So the 4 screws, you just loosen them so they're not grabbing anymore, and then you just flex the body open like a clamshell just to release that. So I'll try and do that on camera. So just flex and pop it out. There you go. I'll come back to the body in a moment, but let's look at the details on the chassis that are different. So first of all, let's look at those float control screws, nuts and bolts. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, as you can see, there's now a new aluminium anodized component there. So this is a bit more sophisticated in terms of controlling the body flow. The chassis float. Okay, so that motion is quite a bit smoother than the previous generation in the Alpha. Yeah, that's quite a nice motion. Now, I haven't worked it out yet, but I'm going to assume that there's a bit more flexibility in terms of what you can do to control this chassis articulation. Because you've got more components here, I'm going to guess there's going to be more options. But that is a nice touch. That is definitely a step forward, without a shadow of a doubt. The next one is this rod here that you see running across the chassis. Now, to me, that is just simply a brace. In the documentation, it's called the height control rod or something like that. I don't know how that works. I've not really had a chance to play with it yet. I'm going to assume it is primarily a brace. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the chassis, this side pan here, similarly at the bottom on the other side, they obviously join around at the front. If this car takes a side impact, this is going to be very easy to bend. Even though it's aluminium, it's going to be very easy to bend, and so a brace is going to hopefully, save you in that regard. And if that's the case, then it's a very welcome addition, because anything that deforms this outside chassis plate, the outside one, anything that deforms that will upset the seating of these articulation controls. So, for those to work properly, all those gaps and clearances have to be maintained at the same level, and I think having a brace there is only going to help that. So that, to me, is another step in the right direction. The next one is the slot guide is mounted forward of the front axle line, which enables you to run a solid front axle. That, for me, again, is a major plus. The Alpha ones, with their camber and being independent front ends on stub axles, they can be made to work, but they require a bit more maintenance and a bit more attention and a lot more oil as well, it has to be said. This, being a much more conventional setup, is going to be easier to maintain and easier to keep your alignment in place as well. And it's also a lot stronger. If this takes a whack, you might survive it. If the Alpha takes a whack, those wheels are going to be skewed all over the place, and it's back to square one in terms of setting them up again. Yeah, so that is a major plus for me, and again, it's in keeping with the character of the Camaro. You don't want the ultra sophisticated setup that you might see on European cars. What you want is you want what the American muscle car was all about at the time, and that is a nice simple front end. Next is the rear end, which is pretty much unchanged. Yeah, you've got the bearing holder, 3mm axle, spacer, and crown gear here with the grub screw to hold it on place on the axle, obviously. Okay. What another advancement that you have with this new chassis is, you see the motor mount here in silver, which is identical to what was on the previous generation in the Alpha. That's great, because that is actually a nice way to control your gear mesh. You can actually move that backwards and forwards in relation to the chassis, and therefore control your gear mesh. I'm not saying it was easy, but it is the way you do it, and it can be done. But the good thing about this is there is also a rear bracket on the end of that motor. Now, you didn't have that with the Alpha. The Alpha ran the one-ended. So you had the blue anodized motor mount on the gear end, but on the other end, the end bell end, there was no bracket there, none whatsoever. So that motor could actually flex around. Whereas in this setup, this is actually held in place with two brackets, 1 and 2. That is a really welcome addition. That's going to give a lot more consistent gear mesh, and it's also probably a requirement of the new motor that they're running. I say new motor in terms of the saloon cars, a touring car, type body shell that we're talking about. This is a potent motor. Okay, I'm just going to read the specs off the label. It is 25k, 25,000 RPM, and it's rated at 325 centimeters of torque. That is a potent motor. Okay, 25. The previous motor in the BRM, those short can motors were rated at 18,000, 19,000 RPM. This is a 25. The torque rating on those things in the Alpha would be somewhere. It would max out at somewhere like 180. This is 325. Yeah, this is a potent motor. Coupled with that, also, you've got a gear reduction here, which is way in excess of what the Alfa had. Okay, you've got an 11 to 41 gear ratio, almost 4 to 1, almost 4 to 1. That is a big reduction. You're going to get a lot of torque on this rear axle as a result of that. There's going to be the latent torque of the motor, the inherent torque, I should say. There's going to be the additional torque of the gear reduction. That's going to put a lot more torque on. And you've also got the weight of the car, which is going to cause lots of torque to be exerted on the axle, things like braking. And when you're under acceleration, you know, if it suddenly breaks traction or whatever, you're going to get very high torque loads going through the rear axle, and you're also going to get going through that rear gear. So that gear, to me, is a plastic gear. It feels, the mesh feels good, but I've got a feeling that's going to be that is going to be a vulnerable part, I think, being plastic and having such high loads put through it. The good news is there, BRM do ergo replacements with different, obviously with different numbers of teeth, so you can actually change the ratio if you want to as well. Also, these are very large diameter wheels and tyres. Again, if I just sit the Alfa on top so that perspective is taken out of the equation, there you go. Look at the size difference. Yeah, that rear gear train on the Camaro is going to be working hard. It's going to be working very hard. Okay, I think that's why they spec'd up the motor. Okay, but I'm pleased to see it. I think this car's going to fly down the straights. I really do. I think it's going to really absolutely fly down the straights. In all respects, I think this is a fairly decent upgrade from the specifications on the Alfa chassis. I think the Alfa chassis sits a little bit lower. This has got quite a high ground clearance. If you look at that, that's quite high ground clearance. Yeah. But again, it's in character with the car of the time. You know, the car of the time didn't run ultra low to the ground. It probably did in comparison to the road car, but you know, the race car, that it wasn't one that used to, you know, sit really low. So yeah, that's those. I can't get over the size of these. There's a lot of rubber in those tyres, a lot of rubber, and a really nice tread pattern too. If you can see that in the close-up there. Yeah, a really nice tread pattern. And the other thing I've noticed about these tyres is they're actually very round out of the box. With a lot of reproduction style tyres on slot cars, you know, the attention is given to the accuracy rather than the roundness of them. And quite often you have to true them, which then ruins the tread. These actually don't look like they're going to need to be trued. These look round already to me, and they look very good. But they're big and chunky, and they probably add to the weight of the car as well. But the same goes for the fronts, same tread pattern, and again, you know, nice and round. So I reckon that would be pretty smooth out of the box. Yeah. So yeah, I think, you know, a number of upgrades there on this chassis, and areas that don't need the upgrade haven't been upgraded. So these bearing holders, you know, on the axles, the slot guide holder, the 3mm axles, the wheels being, you know, aluminium with the set screw in them, the brass spacers. None of this needed attention. They were all good, they were all the good features of the car already. But these other changes, these chassis changes, they look quite interesting to me. They really do. So yeah, I'll pop the body back on. Well, first of all, let's go through the body again in a bit more detail. It's exactly as you would expect from a BRM. Again, the things that don't need to be changed haven't been changed. So the body mounting system is the screw into a pillar with a rubber boot. Yeah, and when you do up the screws, they pinch the chassis between the head of the screw and the rubber boot, and that's how the chassis is held in place. Okay, Lexan interior, you know, pretty much full length for a Lexan interior. You know, from the front of the dash, from the bulkhead, the firewall as it were, from the engine bay all the way back to the rear of the boot lid. Yeah, so a good length, a good Lexan body there. Okay, but basically, you know, a one-piece moulding with, you know, various ancillaries added after the build. Obviously, things like headlights, etc., and the chin spoiler that would be added later. But yeah, nice, very nice body. So let's pop that back on. It's a very easy exercise to do with these large BRMs. Okay, just flex the body and there you go, and there it is. What a gorgeous looking car. I can't wait to be driving this down the new track at Slot Shop, and just to see how what kind of speeds it reaches on the straight, and B, how it handles the banking, because I think it's going to look great going around the banking at Slot Shop. I really do. So there you go. Lovely car. As with the Mustang. The Mustang is a great looking car too. If I had the choice, I'd probably run a Mustang. I'm a Ford man, so I'd probably run a Mustang. If you're a GM guy, you might go for this one. Or if I was a GM guy, I'd be going for the Penske Sunoco. That would be my choice. But, you know, each to his own. Go and have a look. I've not seen anything like this at all from a mass market manufacturer. You know, there are other manufacturers out there that do 1/24ths. They don't do muscle cars in as much detail as this and looking as good as this. This is cut above. It really is. It's a beautiful model. Great looking car. And yeah, I can see clubs putting race series together around this. You know, let's all buy one, and let's all, you know, let's have some muscle car racing, because they would be great. 6 or 8 of those running around a track together. This is going to sell. I think this is going to sell. I don't have pricing for it at the moment. I think it's up on the website today, if I remember rightly. But these are going to sell. You know, the American market is just ready for this, and I think other geographies around the world are going to pick up on this as well. For myself, I'll probably go for a Mustang, but I'm quite taken with this one as well. So there you go, the new BRM Chevy Camaro Z28 Trans Am. What a beast. I'm going to have fun with that one on the track, I tell you. I really am. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope you've enjoyed that as a quick overview of the car. I'm very excited about it. I'm going to be keen to see the sales figures, because I think it's going to be a popular car. So I hope that's given you a bit of an insight. I'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, be kind to somebody today. Okay, cheers.